What is astounding to me is that we continue to sell to everybody on the other end of the phone as if they're exactly like we are, and they talk like we do, and they live in the environment we do.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Jake Stahl. Jake is a pioneer in conversational dynamics and a highly regarded fractional chief learning officer. He is revolutionizing sales through his adaptive conversational blueprint, turning sales professionals into relational architects capable of forging profound connections with prospects. Integral to his approach is the 2-10 rule, which challenges traditional perspectives on conversation and emphasizes the importance of rhythm and cadence. With a rich background spanning 30 years, Jake has shared his expertise in training and development across 6 countries, impacting over 10,000 individuals. A doting husband and father of 4, Jake seamlessly blends practical experience and insightful wisdom in his pursuit of the perfect conversation and empowers businesses through masterful conversations. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Jake. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Oh, Dwight, thanks for having me. It's a true honor.
Me too, brother. It's an honor for both yourself and I, because when you meet people that you can connect and resonate with, even before we have, we had a short conversation before I hit record, I can already feel connected to you, right? And that's the best kind of feeling to have, because then that flows through the whole show. So I look forward to our conversation. For those new to the show, one of the things I focus on is a person's origin story, not just their background from high school on, but all the way back from their earliest recollections, things that shaped them, both the good, bad, and the ugly. It is what defines us, and we sometimes don't give credit to our past, right? People say, well, the past isn't indicative of our future. You're right. It doesn't have to be indicative of our future, but it can be something that is puts us on the right path, directs us in the right, gives us the right course, and the actions that we take can be good or bad based on our past. So to recognize them actually helps us, and it helps you. And that's why I focus on the origin story of the guest such as Jake that's on today. So Jake, tell me your origin story. What key things from your childhood to adulthood to led you where you are today currently?
Well, I grew up in the backwoods of Pennsylvania. There wasn't much around us at all, and my dad was a very prominent business person. And I was raised in the generation where kids were to be seen and not heard. And with my brother and I being 8.5 years apart, I always say I only had a brother for part of my life because he moved out relatively early. But my dad being a prominent business person and my mom being a stay-at-home mom, there were a lot of business events I was taken to. Different functions for fraternal organizations and different groundbreakings. My dad was ahead of a lot of different places. So I was privy to a lot of business conversations. I went to a high school that really was nothing remarkable. We had no pictures hanging in the walls of people who made it big. We had nothing to really hang our hats on. As a matter of fact, our mascot wasn't even really that thrilling. And so I grew up, I believe, in a very sheltered childhood. But when I got to college, that kind of broke away. I started making decisions. Not all of them were great ones. And I would say through my college years and into adulthood, I became quite a risk taker. I think a lot of the decisions that I made were designed to be risky, and some of them worked out great, and some of them worked out horrifyingly bad. But one of the things that led me, I think, to where I am today is I took risks so often that it was no longer risk taking, it was just kind of normal behavior. And at one point, it led me down a very ugly road. And about 10 years ago, I lost my house, got divorced. I think my credit score was a staggeringly high 400. And things were really rock bottom. I always say if the basement had a basement, that's where I was. So it required a long fight back. And that fight back was, again, a lot of risk taking. And I would say going from where I was in childhood, if you were compare the child to where I am now, we're probably complete opposites. I was kind of soft-spoken, sheltered, and now I'm a lot more verbal. And I'm not afraid to try something and completely fail. But saying that, Dwight, there was a change in attitude that happened when my life crashed 10 years ago. I had always taken the attitude of, I'm going to fight to not lose. And I used to justify my actions and my decisions with, well, at least I didn't lose everything. At least that wasn't my primary source of income. At least I'm still alive. And it was always at least I didn't lose. And the thing that has shifted for me over the past 10 years is now I'm at the, I want to play to win and not lose.
Yeah, that is so true. I'm gonna go to that point once we actually dissect a few of the things that you said, because I feel a lot of commonality with you. My dad, business guy, grew up the same way. You're better to be seen, not heard. Not really great and a great way to grow up, because it doesn't teach us that we have an opinion about anything, that it matters about anything, that you hit high school and you broke free. Pick me. I was a massive introvert. I still am today, but I'm not the same as I was back then. I'm a introvert that when required, I'm an extrovert. Otherwise, I'm very much introverted. I'm very much into my own world, which includes my family and friends, right? But otherwise, I'm a person that would just rather not engage with people unless it's required to engage, because why poke the bear if you don't need to poke the bear? Right. So, right.
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from. And it was good to hear that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom as well. I had two older sisters, right? Same sort of idea, distance and time. Got dragged to things by my father because he was a business person as well. Didn't realize till I was an adult how much I learned from him, right?
Agreed.
The amount of things I learned from him, and I had those like aha moments, those light bulb moments, was quite amazing actually. And I actually wrote about it in my own book. The effect that my dad had on me, even the effects of like when we talk about origin, like even me being a paper boy, how it affected me as an entrepreneur, like years later. Just little simple things like that tenacity, that having to deal with a customer, and not like today where everything's electronic and you pay for everything electronic. There's no interaction as often. I had to interact with people 12 years of age, right? Just stuff like that. So I like how you say that, when you broke free in high school. I made a lot of risky and bad choices in high school and going into college, because I was that sheltered kid. My parents were like, my mom was always so super protective, and I love her
Mine
for it,
too.
right? But
Yep.
she was overprotective, way overprotective. I don't, so yeah, I can understand that. And I'm not the same person either. You mentioned you're more verbal today, you're more outgoing than you were as a child. But I bet you there's a lot of things that you're still the same. You just have forced yourself or educated yourself to be outside of that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would. My parents were protective to a large degree. And I think when I got out from under that and I had to have life kick me around a little bit, I learned more. But now I'm the same way with my family. Like I've since remarried. I have 2 stepkids plus 2 biological kids. And to be honest, we don't differentiate. They're just my 4 kids and I'm their dad. And that's just the way that is.
That's
But
awesome.
I'm remarkably overprotective. And I'm
Yeah.
acutely aware of it. And the
Trust
kids
me,
just kind of
I
deal
get
with
it.
it.
Yeah, dude, I never got remarried, but I can understand and relate. I got, like you said, 10 years ago, house lost, divorce. Well, I got divorced a long time ago, right? My kids are all adults now, but it sure shapes us though, doesn't it? Getting divorced and going through that and that feeling of failure, because we may not acknowledge it, but for me it was there, right? I felt desperation, I felt like a failure, did things with my kids and took risks that I shouldn't have. Like, didn't do anything bad with my kids, but I did more for them than I should have when I couldn't, right? I expended myself not just financially but emotionally and mentally more than I should have, because I had that harboring, pain right here, going like, what did I do wrong? Am I that bad of a person? So, I get it. And losing a house, I never lost a house, but I've lost lots of other things and barely hung on. But it's, been that person, and you visualize in a body of water and your head's back like this and your mouth's barely above the water breathing, and
Yeah.
you can't tread much longer, right? That pain sucks. So I'm glad to hear that you have turned your life around though. Congratulations. And and having stepkids, whatever, right? As long as everybody's equal in the eyes of, for me, everybody's equal in the eyes of God. So whether it's biological or non-biological, whatever, right? As long as they're
Yeah.
kind and you're kind, is it going to be perfect? That's not realistic. Nothing's perfect. You're going to have challenges. Like, my 5 kids are all adults. I got 5 grandkids and I got 1 great granddaughter now. So
Nice.
I've made it through all of it, except I lost something. My
Well,
hair.
mine's on its way out too. I think,
Right.
Dwight, the great thing about failure is that if you're not careful, you learn something. And
That's a
I
great way to
will
put that's a great way to put it.
I will say that the moments of clarity that I think can be confused with desperation can be life changers. There were a lot of nights I sat in my hall at 3 in the morning just by myself, just thinking how tragic it had become. And there's no light. And the only light at the end of the tunnel is a train on its way. And when you look at those moments, you're in panic, you're in desperation.
You feel alone though.
Well, you're 1,000% alone because you feel nobody can relate. You feel nobody out there can possibly understand what you're going through. And then when you come out the other side and you've talked to a lot of people who've gone through similar things, you realize that everybody goes through this. Everybody goes through some sort of remarkable, earth shattering pain. And the people who make it out the other side are not always the strongest. They're just the ones that learn. We always say it's survival of the fittest. And I would argue that that's not entirely accurate. I think it's survival of the people who are willing to admit they made a ton of mistakes and they can come back. Because I think until you look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and you say, I forgive you, you're going to be okay. I think until you get to that stage, it's overwhelmingly difficult. And
Oh,
it
it's
took me a while to
emotional.
get to that stage. Oh, it's super emotional.
Well,
I cried
oh,
many, many nights in a row.
dude, I can feel the emotion from you, and I can see it. I feel the same way. Like I used to lay in bed in quiet desperation and cry and wake up in
Oh,
the
yeah.
morning because I became a single dad of my kids. When some of them were teenagers, and I had a couple below teenage years, and suffer and have to put that smile on my face and that facade as I
Yes.
come down the stairs, and then not take it off until I go back to bed because somebody was already around, right? It was that I'm never gonna I'm never gonna show them vulnerability. They need to have a strong dad, and I learned from that stuff. And you move forward and think to yourself, nobody's ever going to relate, but like you said, we do find people that can relate, can understand our pain and suffering. And I do agree, we don't always necessarily be the person that's going to be the strongest after it's over. But I think we learn we learn from it. And the worst thing though is to stop learning. So to keep on climbing and going through that process of that personal development so that we can be aware. So like that, I coach people on not having a bad day. It's been years, and I have, even this past week, I've had opportunity, Jake, where I thought I was going to literally melt down, and I had to do the things that I coach others. I was doing it like 10 times, trying to make it so that I didn't have to say I had a bad day. Having that gratefulness and that gratitude that life doesn't teach us by natural progression of growing up to being an adult. So it sucks though that you had to go through that, or I've had to go through it, but we're better people for it. And now we're out doing what I love the most, giving a heck and serving others and making sure that we can help them collapse their time frames so they don't have to have as many nights sitting in the hallway like you're talking about, or me lying in bed, quiet desperation, that helplessness and thinking that we're alone. And the number one thing that I love that you said, you forgave yourself. Those listening or watching, your biggest healing is going to be when you can admit to yourself and forgive yourself for anything you've gone through. Even if somebody's causing all your grief and pain, something you did caused that person to be in your life. So you forgive yourself for bringing that person into your life. Forgive yourself. And that's the first baby step to healing. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I agree 100%. Because then outside of forgiving yourself is making a hearty attempt to forgive others that you felt have had a negative impact, and understanding that they're going to bed with the same scenarios and the same crap that you went through or are going through. And listen, Dwight, I want to put in a disclaimer. I am not 100% perfect. I have my days, I have my nights. The thing I can say is I cope with them much, much, much differently than I did before. I don't think anybody has the point where they don't reach the point you were just talking about, Dwight, where you have to try to stop yourself from going over the edge. And I'm a firm believer, even with my kids, that we get so caught up in social media that we think that a ton of other people have nothing but great days. And they may, but they may have different coping mechanisms. And we have to, in my opinion, we need to compare ourselves to who we were, not who other people are.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
As we progress and as we get better, we look back on our past and say, I'm better than I was at that day. But in my life, there were no light year shifts. There was no seismic jump that I went from the tragedies that I put myself through to today. It was just a one day at a time approach. Hey, got through today. Tomorrow's going to be a little bit better. And before you know it, 10 years goes by. It's,
But
yeah.
the reflection, no, I can hear it though. Like you mentioned about, see, you reflected a lot and you admit. So you forgive yourself. I've heard that. You've reflected and admitted that you've done this. People listening, watching, like honestly, those are very simple steps, but they're also difficult steps.
Oh, they're
right?
super difficult.
You're gonna have your emotional IQ is gonna go up and down like a roller coaster as you work through it. And if you can find somebody to help mentor you, coach you, just listen to you and give you advice when you need it, or not advice when you just need somebody to listen, is important. Because to admit that you did this wrong in your work life, your personal life, your marriage, the list goes on. It sucks. It's tough. But if you don't admit it, you're going to do the same mistakes again. It becomes that hamster wheel of life that I coach people on. Aren't you tired of being on that hamster wheel, going on it, getting off, going on it, getting off, and never seeing, any progression in your life? Maybe you need to look at reflection, right? Living a life that's intentional is not easy. It's not hard, but it takes work. No matter what it is, look at success. No success you and I have had has been just, oh, here, we're going to hand you success, Jake. You don't have to work for it. No
Yep.
emotional hangover for you, Jake. You don't have to worry about that. We're just going to be there and give it all to you. Right? What
I
do you
will say,
go
go
ahead?
ahead, Dwight. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
To the point of what you were saying, Dwight, the biggest revelation I had, and maybe this will help bring this together with what you were saying, is it's an amazing weight off your shoulders when you don't worry about being right all the time.
Oh,
When you lose that need to say, I didn't do anything wrong, or I didn't, life made me the victim. When you can just all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but when you can learn to drop that, it, the relief is just almost unbelievable. Before I had my wonderful journey down to the bottom of the caverns and up again, I was that type of person that was, I'm right. This happened to me. I shouldn't be punished for this. I shouldn't do this. And I think the turning point was when I started to look at things that were happening and saying, wow, this was just dumb. I made a lot of dumb decisions.
yeah.
And when people say to me something and I say, I don't know, it feels good. It feels nice to not know everything or keep everything on your back. But the letting go was difficult. That was years in the making of
Oh,
letting things
definitely.
go. It doesn't happen overnight. You just kind of admit you're wrong maybe once every week and a half, and then you go to like maybe once a week, and you kind of get to the point where I joke with my wife, if I'm not wrong 6 times before breakfast, it's kind of a slow day. And that's
Did
the mantra I go by. I know I'm going to be wrong at times, and I know I'm going to make mistakes, but contrary to how I was before everything happened, now I learn from them and I play to win, not just not to lose. That's almost become my mantra.
No, and and that's great. Like the evolution of what you're talking about. To me, the thing that pops into my mind, and most people don't give it enough thought or credit, is along that journey. Would you say that your associations of not just people, but everything that you read, listened to, like anything that you did in your life, were your associations changing along the way? So when you went from having multiple times a week where you had those gripping things to where it was once a week, was there a progression of your knowledge base of what you were educating your 6 inches between your ears changing?
Yeah, it was. I take a lot of solace in reading and listening to podcasts and things like that. And when I was in the depths, I excluded all of that. It's like, I don't want to hear anything positive. I don't want to do anything. None of this was my fault. And as I came out of that, as I started to progress out, I found myself changing who I hung around with. That was part of my divorce. I needed to change that. And I knew the pain I was going to go through. And I went through it anyway. And I'm glad I did because it's in my past now. And please understand, I'm not saying my ex was an ugly person. I'm saying we just weren't right for one another. And so recently I heard a speaker who probably said it best. And the speaker said, you are the sum total of the 5 people you talk to the most. And it makes a lot of sense. When I joke around that I changed my 5. When I changed my 5, life started to turn around a little bit. And I found myself still talking to the people I talked to before, but I don't put as much weight on their comments as I used to. But here's the thing, Dwight. I realized why I hung around with certain people during that time period. I hung around with people who were at a same low as I was and who I thought I was better than. And that was my solace. I was hanging around with a group that had nothing better than me, and I was better than they were. And as I shifted and realized I wasn't better than anybody else, I started to associate myself with people who were remarkably successful, light years beyond me. And that started to change things. I started to get different points of view. And when I admitted I was wrong about the paths that I took before and started to actually listen to other people, man, what a difference. But again, that didn't happen overnight. That was years of trying to change a mental habit that I had for the previous 50. You
Well,
know,
it's
I
another
started
pain.
my
It's
life
another
over at
pain.
50. It
It's another
is.
pain. It's another pain you
Yeah.
go through because as you drop associations, again, associations just doesn't have to be people. It can be what you watch, you listen to, read. Your body gets stuck into a habit, and it
Yep.
yearns to have comfort. Whether
Right.
that comfort's commiserating or feeling like garbage, it's still comfort, and
Right.
it's tough as you drop associations. And you talked about the fact that you don't necessarily talk to those same people the same way. You don't give their what they say as much weight. I 100% agree that happens, and eventually they fall off altogether. You just don't talk to them anymore. You might run into them at a friend event or whatever. It would never be at a social event that you're going to because
Right.
even your social calendar changes. The type of conferences you go to changes. The type of everything you do changes. Your communication changes. So when you're talking to somebody, all of a sudden they don't like what you're saying because you're not doom and gloom, or you're not somebody
Right.
that's bragging to them. And sometimes, like you say, you're with a group of people that's beneath you in your mindset, and you don't realize that you're projecting to them that which you're actually not. You
Right.
may be a little bit better than them, but you're broken too. And you all commiserate with one another and you look forward to hanging out. And I don't know about in your circumstances, but a lot of groups I know and clients, especially my client base of 21 years, then they fall into addiction even more. They go from being a social person doing things like, alcohol or whatever. Now they're doing it. They can't wait for it. Right.
Right.
To hang out with
Yep.
that group of people because they're all, as they're drinking more, they're commiserating more in a bad way, right? So good
Yeah.
for you. Good for you. It's a journey though. So those listening, don't think it's not a journey, but it is so fulfilling. Like you said, you had to get rid of the association. One of it was marriage. Me too. And mine's been a lot longer than 10 years. It still comes up, right? Because I have kids with her, just like
Of
you do,
course.
right?
No,
So
same
it's
here. Yep.
right. But now I don't connect. I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't have to.
Right.
They're their person. I'm my person. I'm up here, and
Exactly.
I'm up here in a thought process. I'm not saying I'm better than her, but her thought
Exactly.
process is here. My thought process is there. I'm at she's in the valley of despair. I'm not. I'm on the mountaintop climbing.
Right.
Camping once in a while when I need a break, but then I'm getting up and climbing again.
I think that's
Right.
the other misconception that I used to hear a lot, Dwight, that I think it kind of helped me back was I would listen to motivational speakers and they'd always say, you just keep going and are you living your best life? And I have no idea. I hope so, and I'm trying. But
Yeah.
that to me is one of the most worthless sayings. Are you living your best life? Well, I'm doing better than I was yesterday, and I've got sky high hopes for tomorrow. Is that my best life? I have no idea. Do I still have bad times? Absolutely.
Oh,
But my
at least you're
attitude towards
honest
them
with
is much
yourself.
different. Right? Exactly. Exactly.
Honesty to ourselves is sometimes the hardest, we're our most critical person in our lives. We're our biggest enemy and our biggest cheerleader, right?
Yep.
So I
Yep.
get it. I wake up in the morning. I'm grateful because not everybody listening or watching is me. I'm a Christian. I'm a God-fearing person. I wake up in the morning and I thank God for giving me another shot. Last night when I went to bed, I literally said my prayers and then I have gratefulness exercise. It doesn't take me long, couple minutes, sometimes a little longer, and I break down my day, even the negative parts of it, and I force myself to reflect and actually live intentionally and say, that really sucked. What good can I take out of that? Sometimes it's really tough. But I go to bed with more peace because I'm honest with myself. And I get up saying, "Hey, thank you for letting me breathe again today. Let's hit it. Let's go." All right. Let's we're going to have a great day, and sometimes there's great character building moments, and other times, I just have a fantastic, amazing day, and there's not a lot to break down when I go to sleep. And those are the best days. But the ones that aren't like that, there's also goodness in them. But I have to force myself to find the goodness in my day, right? And it is a challenge,
Yes.
brother.
Yeah, it is. I'll give you a funny example. I live in Norwich, Connecticut, and we just had huge floods here. A dam broke
Okay.
locally, flooded out a lot of the businesses and houses. Well, for the past week, literally, I've had thousands of gallons of water flooding into my basement daily. So my
Oh,
wife and I
brother.
we've been switching out doing shop vacs and getting rid of the water, and our sump pumps working overtime, but we're literally not sleeping we're sleeping in shifts so that we can get the water out. So Friday, just a couple of days ago, for your listeners who are listening to this later, just a couple of days ago, the water stopped and our basement's dry. And I said to my wife, this gives me a new gratefulness perspective to look at. Because if I go to a doctor and he says, Jake, I'm sorry, you really have heart problems, I can say, yeah, doc, but at least my basement's dry. So it's funny how
Oh, I
I
love it.
was at my wit's end at 3 a.m. with water flooding and not knowing what to do. And now you look back on it and you go, I can learn something from this. I now am grateful to have a home that is safe and not being flooded anymore. Sometimes you really have to look, but
I'm
yeah,
grateful. I'm grateful for a shop vac.
right. Yeah, we
Here's your pail. I think of a guy on a boat with a pail as the water is coming in. Like, what are you gonna do? You're in the basement.
well, we bought extra shop vacs so we could rotate them out. So now I've got a bunch. So I was joking with the kids. I said, when we pass away and you empty this house, you're gonna have a ton of shop vacs to get rid of. We're just storing them up.
All of a sudden, I see a driveway and a shop vac with a little sign: "Shop vac free." Like,
Right.
take it away. I got
Yeah.
enough.
And each day it's a different shop vac.
Oh, this has been a great conversation so far. We're going to get on to some more stuff about what you are currently accomplishing, what you have accomplished in regards to
Sure.
your entrepreneurship. Jake, you are a conversational maestro and a fractional chief learning officer. What is a fractional chief learning officer? And in the grand schemes of a hierarchy in a company, where would a position like this fit and why?
Sure, great question. The fractional movement has really started to build over the years. And the fractional movement is that you were hired by a company to take on a C-suite role for a fractional period of time. So in other words, I'm a fractional chief learning officer. So I kind of run the training and development department plus any type of sales training. So a company might say to me, hey, listen, we have limited funding, but we need a training department. We need a formal onboarding program, and we need to hire some salespeople. But we can't afford to hire you full time. That's fine. So what I do is I break it down and I come up with a length of time. So it could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and it could be so many hours per week. But instead of being a consultant where you take it on a contract basis or you take it based on a project, you actually sit in a C-suite seat. So you make directional decisions for the company. You make hires, you make fires, but you do it at a fraction of the cost for somebody who'd be there full time. And you do it for a fraction of the time that they'd be there. So what I do as a chief learning officer for companies, and I have a couple of clients right now I'm working with, I go in and I help them build out their sales training and development program or the training and development program for the entire company. Maybe it's legal, finance, whatever the case may be. But I encourage them by saying, you don't need me full time. You need a department. You don't need me. You need results. And in that, I save companies money. I am able to work with several clients at a time, and they get, and please forgive me for floating my own boat, but they get world-class help. They get somebody who's been around the mill, who knows it and can get in there and do the job. But they don't have to worry about firing me later. They don't have to worry about keeping budget on for me or paying benefits. All they need to do is tell me what they need done. I tell them how long it's going to take. And some companies, like two clients I'm working with right now, they keep me on retainer then. They say, you built it for us, great, thank you. We need probably 20 hours of your time per month. Can we do that? And I do that. Some companies don't need me on retainer at all. But a lot of people are doing fractional work now. And I want to give a shout out to people who do that. Chief marketing officer, chief sales officer. These people are taking their many years of experience and dedicating it to a company and keeping their budget small. I joke that your budget won't even hear me come and go. But you're really, I just think it's an amazing movement. And I'm
No,
happy to be part of it.
it sounds amazing because, you know, I did read up on it last night when I was building up my questions and stuff and the flow that I wanted to go through. And I found it quite intriguing. And I also thought to myself, what an interesting way to keep you relevant in your mindset. Because now you're not stuck. You're not that person that's been hired to be at that corporation. You've been there 5, 10, 15 years. Your brain's gone dead. It
Yeah,
really
no
has
doubt.
because you haven't had anything. Our brain is a giant computer. It needs new relevant information all the time, right till the day we
Yep.
take our last breath. And those people, I know it's listening to the show that are in those circumstances. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying that what Jake is doing has allowed him to, you know, have so many more different experiences. Yes, his process of what he does may be the same, but each time he's touching a different company to help them, that's a different fingerprint. That's exciting. That's like, oh, we're at ground zero. I'm going to take you to, you know, ground zero to floor 90, and it's going to take this amount of time, and you get to watch their, ooh, ah, right? I didn't realize that. You know what I mean? You get to feel all that goodness as you're helping them on the climb because they were camped. So the person that's camped in that position, I talk to them. They're just, a lot of them are just biding their time for retirement. And it's just,
Right.
they're not happy. Whether they're in
Yep.
that, and that's people in 9 to 5 jobs of all types. Entrepreneurs, business owners wonder why when I sit with business owners and they wonder why their income has peaked or it's dropped. It's usually because it's tied to their 6 inches and the people within their hierarchy of their structure, depending on how big their company is. So I think what you're doing is amazing. It gives companies opportunities, but at the end, I think it's the biggest benefit is for you to continue to climb in your mindset and always feel relevant because you can always start with somebody new with their fingerprint and help them, you know, achieve greatness. Right. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and the movement has really, it's becoming centralized. There was a big frac conference that took place in Minnesota last year. There's another one that's taking place in Minnesota this year, and it's really becoming organized. And I think as it becomes more organized, companies are going to see that a lot of roles really are fractional. Because I've been in training development for 30 years, I can tell you we're the last to get budget and we're the first to get cut. I'm fractional by nature. So why hire me full time?
Yeah, that's just, it makes so much sense. So that these companies, I look at when we have economic downturn in North America or around the world, and companies all of a sudden, I've seen it my whole life, right? Since I was little, they restructure and they get rid of their staff and they cut out all the dead layers. Well, if they had a lot of those positions as fractional positions, it would be so much easier to move forward. They would
Right.
not have to go through the amount of bloat that they have. Like they're bloated. Like it's just unbelievable how many companies have it. And it can be a small little company that has it. They keep on that person because they did well for them the first few years. Now they add no value, but they figure they need to have that quote, quote, position in place to make them look a certain way or present a certain way or feel a certain way or, you know, that old boys club mentality. Right.
It
And
is a
I think,
mindset.
oh, definitely a mindset. So I appreciate the fact that people such as yourself are evolving the business world. So, Jake, you've spent over 30 years across 6 countries crafting a transformative approach called the adaptive conversational blueprint. What exactly is this blueprint? And how have you differentiated it from other processes people teach in regards to how to be that good conversationalist and say the right things the right way?
Sure. Well, that takes a little bit of unpacking. So let's start in
Let's
the
go.
beginning. The adaptive conversational blueprint is just that. It's a blueprint of how to provide value. Now, there's a lot of great programs out there, and I want to put in another disclaimer that I am not cutting down on any sales program. Value-based selling, the Sandler method, they're all exceptional. So I don't want to come out and say mine is better. But here's what mine does do is it creates a unique proposition in that By doing this, I can identify almost immediately after a sales conversation where the value statement went astray, because we turn it into somewhat of a math equation. It's got to have 6 components in order for it to be a successful equation. But then what we do, Dwight, is we take it to the next step and we do what I call localization of message. So if I'm in New York City and I'm selling to another New Yorker, that's going to be a much different sell than if I'm in New York City and I'm selling to Savannah, Georgia, or I'm selling to Dallas, Texas, or I'm selling to somewhere in Oklahoma. And I think the place that mine stands above others is that I'm very much into the localization of message. So your script may be great, but how does it adapt to working in another environment? My daughter moved down to North Carolina a couple of years ago, and she says to me, Dad, this is a whole different people. It's a whole different way of life. And she's right. And that's not astounding news. But what is astounding to me is that we continue to sell to everybody on the other end of the phone as if they're exactly like we are, and they talk like we do, and they live in the environment we do. So the localization of message is a huge, huge part of what I stress in the conversational blueprint.
That's awesome though, because I wrote down here selling across states is different. In Canada, where I live, it's provinces. For those listening in the US, same thing. We just call ours a province. You call yours a state, but it's so different. You can go to one province beside us, complete farming, whole province, right? Majority of it's farming. Where you come to our province, it's farming. It's we're considered the Texas of Canada, because we're similar to Texas in the US. We're an energy province, Alberta, where I live, right? Oil and gas, but we have forestry. We also have the farming. We have differences. So compared to the province of farming, we got so many more differences. Then you go to like British Columbia, for those in the US, BC, it's on the Pacific coast, right above California. They literally are majority forestry, because there's mountains and trees everywhere. That's their biggest staple, and tourism, right? But you go and travel to these places. I have a daughter that lives in BC. It's completely different. Like, I've noticed the changes as she's been there for quite a few years, and watched relatives that live there change. I have relatives that live in Saskatchewan. We're all people, but we all have a community. Our province or state is a community. Now, our local community could be our city or a town. That could be even different than your state or province. It's amazing how we don't stop and look around us, what's evolving and developing. We live in that little hamster wheel life. But once you break free of that, you start seeing so much more. So good for your daughter to see that already. Great job, Dad. Right? You must have done something to help that thought process. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, she lives down there, and it took a little bit of adjusting because she was a Pennsylvania, Connecticut girl. And so she's had to make some adjustments over time.
Of course she would. It's so much fun watching our children evolve, right?
It certainly is.
Is it always good? No. No,
No.
because they're just mini me's of us. They go through their character building moments. They go into the valley of despair. They have the nicest thing though is when those same children reach out and talk to us about it, don't hide it and want advice. Right. I have
I
a daughter
agree.
that's coming in to see me she has a business, and she wants some more advice and she wants some help. Right. But it's taken her years to come to that.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Realization that maybe dad can help her out, because what is the most things that kids think? Well, I don't want to share that with my parents. They're going to judge me.
Exactly
Right.
right.
They're
Yeah.
going to sit in judgment of me. The advice they give me is because they're judging me. And like I tell my kids and relatives, very few of my relatives are my clients, and I have a crap ton of relatives. My dad was one of 18 kids. My mom was one of
Oh,
9.
wow.
So, but
Wow.
very few of them are my clients because they don't want to share. They don't want me to judge them, blah, blah, blah. And the ones that actually are my clients know that I don't. I treat them the same as if I didn't ever know them. Here's the
Right.
process. Here's what I'm going to take you through. This is what I'm telling you. And, if they get personal about it, I just remind them, listen, this is what I do for my own clientele, like that they're
Yep.
not related to me. but my years of experience, maybe they can help you. Now, if you don't feel there's a fit, then, you're going to have to find somebody that there is a fit, but don't find somebody that's going to tell you what you want to hear. You need to hear what you don't want to hear.
That is absolutely true. And I
Right?
find a lot of times when I work with a client, and I do individual coaching as well, but a lot of times when I work with somebody, we'll have a 1 hour conversation and I'll say, so what do you think you need? And 8 to 9 times out of 10, what they need from my perspective is not what they're telling me they need. And it doesn't make them, I'm not saying that to make it like they're unintelligent. But it's funny how when you look from the outside, it's easier to see that solution. And we do it in our own lives. A very good friend of mine says it's hard to read the label when you're sitting inside the jar. And it's just very, very true. So you need somebody to come and read that label for you. But again, you need to be open enough to say, yeah, yep, you're right. So help me with what I need. And that's
Yeah,
hard. That
it
could
is
be the
very hard.
hardest thing we do as humans, right? Is to say we're wrong or we don't know what we need because we're closest to ourselves. And yet I'd argue we probably know the least about ourselves out of anybody we know.
Yeah, like the old adage goes, the mechanic has the worst running vehicle, right? Because
Right, exactly.
they just and I have had to struggle with that myself. I did a speech years ago down in Salt Lake, and it literally was about 2008, the worst year of my life, and how I had to reset myself. And I've had that reset. That speech that I did is only 14 minutes, but it literally was a reset of my life. I had to look back and what am I doing for everybody else that's working, and why am I not doing it for myself?
Oh,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Like,
I ask myself that all the
oh,
time.
that reflection again, back to that reflection. So we're going to move
Yeah.
on here. Jake, I
Okay.
personally have spoken and coached for years about cadence and practice it myself consistently to ensure I don't fall into old traps. You yourself value cadence over content in a conversation. Can you explain why cadence is so important? And what do you teach in regards to staying the course with one's cadence?
Sure. So I liken this to that phone call that we get. And you know who it's from. It's that person that when they light up your caller ID, you look at it and go, I don't think I have the time for this. Or you're like, I'm just not in the mood for this. Chances are the reason you hate to pick up that call is because that person dominates the conversation and it's all about them. And you know the content before you even click talk, right? It's going to be about them and their needs. So my argument about cadence versus content is that unless you have that back and forth, unless you know who you're talking to is going to give you that back and forth, the content doesn't matter because the content comes from interest from both parties. So Dwight, if I want to tell you the most fascinating fact on the planet, there's a couple of things to consider. First of all, I'm the one who finds it fascinating. It may not be you. And if I tell you that fascinating fact for the next half hour, that fascination is going to dwindle pretty quick. But if I say I have something fascinating for you, Dwight, and you know it's going to be a back and forth, it's going to change the look of the conversation. So the cadence or that back and forth is far more important than content, at least in the beginning. But once that cadence is established, the content starts to take over. And this is where many of the companies that I work with start to fall shy because they have sales teams who want to just talk about themselves and they want to make the sale and they want to get off the call and move to the next person, but it's never a conversation. A great example of this is when somebody says, hi, how are you? Not a conversation. It is something we say out of rote. My wife and I were Christmas shopping, and I walked by a guy and our eyes met, and I just said, hey. And he goes, fine, thanks. How are you? Just it's how we
My
react
brain
and stuff.
shuts off. My brain shuts off now when people
Right.
say, because I know majority of people don't give two toots,
No, they don't care. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So when you start off by that, you're already acknowledging that content isn't going to matter, but you're trying to establish a cadence. And when that cadence goes back and forth and we build trust with one another, then the content matters. As a matter of fact, something miraculous takes place. If I make a mistake, Dwight, when you and I first talk, you may have that judgment in your head that Jake is a little bit off here. But if we've talked for 10 minutes and we've had a great back and forth and we build trust, and then I make a mistake, you're like, oh, that's just Jake. He just misspoke. Our attitudes shift as we develop that cadence. And I think of little kids, 5-year-olds, their conversations are awesome. That's my mom. Which one is yours? I like trucks. What do you like? My favorite color is black. What's yours? Cadence is just natural.
Because they're
But
naturally curious, though. A 5-year-old
right,
wants to know what you like. They want to know things about you. It's genuine.
correct. Right. But that's, I think, Dwight, where we start to lose it. And the 2-10 rule I've established actually puts police tape around that. So instead of just saying we should do a back and forth, when I work with my clients and we're talking, every 2 minutes, you should have an interaction. And when I mean interaction, I mean you should ask a question, or you should inquire about something they said, or even just repeat it back. And then at the end of every 10 minutes, there should be a summation. All right, so as I understand what we just talked about, this is what I've heard. Is that right? And whether you do this in a presentation as a public speaker, or you do it as a trainer or a boss, or even sitting down with your significant other or your best friend, it's life-changing. Because here's the next miraculous thing that happens. If I have a good conversation with you today, and then let's say in a week I reach out to you, you're going to go, hey, Jake and I had a really good conversation. Yeah, I'll talk to him again. So I'm not only encouraging an interaction, but I'm setting a precedent for interactions to come. So the 2-10 rule, in all honesty, it's every 2 minutes and 10 minutes, but it doesn't have to be that. That's like the maximums. Again, that's the police tape around it. It could be the 30-second 2 minutes rule. It could be the 1 minute, 5 minute rule. All it's saying is that cadence is extremely important. And as we progress as a society with AI and social media, it's getting lost more and more. Because when we're trying to communicate with people, we're rushing it and we're trying to get results. And that building of trust is getting lost. I've 3x companies' sales by teaching their sales team this. But it's so basic. And we already have this skill. It's just a matter of bringing it to the forefront again.
No, that skill, though, the number one skill through all of this is a skill of listening, right? Listening.
100%.
It's so many of us, like, I love what you're talking about because I've developed that in my own, because I've had another business prior to this. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I learned through each of those processes that relationships are key, listening to my clients are key, and being able to look at them and say, so this is what I hear from you. This is what I think you've said to me, and this is what I think you're wanting as a result. Is that correct? Well, no, actually, part of that's correct. You have that cadence, that back and forth, that
Absolutely.
conversation, that I give a shit about you, right? I'm just being blunt. It's true, though.
Right. Yeah, it is.
Right? Because that's
Yep.
what people don't, like I always tell this to people, it drives people crazy. People don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. That's how you succeed in sales, because each one of you listening is in sales. I don't care what you do for a living. You're selling your time for dollars.
Yep.
And if you're going to be the best possible employee, you need to be a person that has good communication skills. That's how you're going to get possibly promoted. That's how you're possibly going to get more results for the company. That's where your opinion is going to matter more, because your opinion isn't focused and centered on you. Your opinion is focused and centered on building that relationship and them loving you as much as you love them. And at the end of it, I teach a principle. I love that principle of yours. So the 2-10 rule, I teach people a 70-30 principle and it ties right to yours. I love that. I'm going to interject some of it and I'll give you credit because of the fact that 70% of the time, I don't care who it is that when I deal with, I want to leave them and them leave me wanting to have me come back into their lives or vice versa, and a smile on their face 30% of the time, they might do something or say something, as long as it's not morally apprehensive and illegal. I'm excited to, Jake kind of said something like, and you mentioned that Jake kind of said something, but I know Jake, so he just had a misstep. I like how you put that.
Right.
So it ties into mine. And 70% of the time, though, I can't wait till Jake and I communicate, whether it's a text, an email, a phone call, a video call. Jake excites me. And that's the type of people we all need to surround ourselves with, whether it's friends, family, clients. It don't matter. You're selling to somebody. You are so much more valuable to you and to everybody around you when you can learn that relationships are key, that cadence, that interaction. And this is so refreshing. I love this.
Well, it's funny you mentioned listening. So I'd like to just develop on your point
Sure.
a little bit, how
Yes,
listening
please
is so
do.
important. We've known that we want to communicate to be heard for a long time. Cave drawings are the perfect example. Why write that up if you're not looking to document something that people can look at later? Look at hieroglyphics, look at language. We're always anticipating someone will listen, and it's as old as time itself. And yet we don't do much to try and hone that skill. And when it comes to that listening, I agree with you. Salespeople, we're all salespeople. Whether I'm trying to sell my wife to go out to dinner tonight, which doesn't take much, by the way, or I'm trying to sell somebody to take my product, it's always an anticipation of I'm going to talk and you're going to listen. So in that respect, it's so crucial when I talk to companies that we understand, to your point, Dwight, the listening is the biggest part of it. If we didn't think people were going to listen, we wouldn't sell anything. But we do anticipate that. And in all honesty, they anticipate it from you as well. And that to me is the secret of two-way communication. It's as old as time. Nobody draws a cartoon for a newspaper thinking nobody will read it. And me reading the cartoon is me listening to your cartoon, listening to your ideas and your views. So we don't always listen with our ears. Sometimes we listen a bunch of different ways.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I love how you put that. But yeah, it's, I get people asking me, I've been on podcasts myself, or I'll get people just in conversation, and like, you've probably been asked this, or maybe you haven't, like, what would you tell your 18 or 19-year-old self if you could do it all over again and you could talk to you, and what would be the biggest thing that would help you? Listen more, talk less.
Right? Yeah, you're to be seen and not heard.
Yeah, it literally just listen to people and
Yeah.
lean in a little bit, and don't be thinking to yourself, what am I going to respond to what they're saying? Literally think about what they're saying. Your brain's still going to have that ability to latch on and know what that it wants to respond, because we want to be seen and heard as well. But
Right.
if you develop and work on it, I still work on it, to listen
Me
and then
too.
interject when it should be, you are going to have that 70-30 principle with just about everybody you meet. Even the person at the local store will walk in that recognizes me. You can have a little bit of a cadence of communication and then walk in and they see you and there's a smile on their face. You haven't even opened your mouth, because it's a
Yeah.
process you've developed by being kind and being a good listener and interjecting and interacting. Compliments or something part of that process too. I taught my
Yep.
kids that. Dad, why did you say to that person, oh, you had a nice necklace, or oh, you got a nice tie, oh, I like your shirt, I like your blouse, oh, you got a great smile. And they used to say to me, I had one of my daughters one time when they were younger, are you trying to manipulate them? Yes, I am. What do you mean? In a good way. I'm manipulating them
Right.
because I might be the only positive thing they've heard that day.
Very true.
Be genuine about it, but that's where you start that relationship. And then they started doing it as they were growing up. And we go into that same store and, oh, I just love your kids. And it would because they were just, oh, I really like what you're wearing. Or, oh, I really, I love seeing you. You always got a great smile. Just be genuine, people. It's part of that conversation. It's part of that relationship. It's part of that escapism of transactional being number one. Transaction at the
Correct.
end. We always have to have a transaction to survive. But all the way along the line, that transaction is going to be so much more meaningful You'll sleep better. They'll sleep better. You both get value from life. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, so let me interview you for a second because
Okay, go ahead.
I'm curious your thoughts. So you teach communication. I love your 70-30, and I love the listening without thinking about what you're saying next. So if somebody came to you and said, Dwight, are you a good communicator? What would your response be?
Today I am. An hour from now, I might have a character building moment and I might not be. But at that point in time in my life, I will disconnect myself and I'll be honest with you and say, you know what? I'm just not right in the brain space right now. I'm having some brain fog and I want to give you 100% to me to make sure I give you value to our conversation or whatever. If you're asking me for an email, I'm going to wait until tomorrow to respond or that text, because that's where we get into trouble, where we're not honest with ourselves, that we're in a communication downfall at that moment. It's back to those character building moments. So I do tell people that I need to disconnect myself. At this moment, yes, I'm a great conversationalist. I'm there. I'm 100%. And then be honest when you're not, because you're doing people a disservice if you're faking it until you make it. That's just not the way it is. So that's my answer.
Love your answer. Thank you for your honesty.
You're welcome, brother. So one of the things I wanted to, Jake, I found that so many people devalue the power of words. I myself have practiced and continue to practice what I referred to as wordsmithing. You teach that one or two words can make a big difference in a conversation. Can you share why that is and give an example?
Yeah, sure. I'm a firm believer that we're all conditioned. And if you look back to the teachings of B.F. Skinner, who was a Harvard-educated doctor, he had a philosophy that free will is an illusion. Decisions we make and words we use, they're conditioned because we've used them before and they've shown success. So you're going to use them again, hoping to recreate that success. Now, B.F. Skinner's philosophies, whether you agree with them or not, do shine with truth a little bit, because there are some words we can say that get kind of a preconditioned response. And I'll give you a great example. Social psychologists did a study in a New York public library. And the study was they took interns and they said, you are going to butt in line at that copier in front of a bunch of New Yorkers waiting to make copies. Now, as you may guess, even being in Canada, you don't want to butt in front of a bunch of New Yorkers. It's just not healthy.
Yeah, pull out a gun.
So they had a very low compliance rate, needless to say. So the psychologist said, do me a favor and give them a reason. So say, because I have kids in the car, because I'm late for work. And what they found was amazing in that they had a 60% increase in compliance by using because followed by a great excuse. But here's the fascinating part. It was only because that made a difference, because they upped the stakes again with another study and said, now I want you to butt in and just say, I'd like to cut in line to make copies because I need to make copies. And what they found was the compliance rate wasn't as high as a 60%, but it was really close. So what they determined was the word because can be somewhat of a game changer. So Dwight, I'd like me to be on your podcast because I would make a great guest. Jake, I'd like you to be on my podcast because what you have to say is interesting. So the because creates a cause and effect mentality for us. And we're used to that, right? I touch a stove, I get burned. I step on ice, I'm going to slip. I yell at my spouse, they're going to yell back. So we are attuned to cause and effect, and because emphasizes that. So yeah, just simple word shifts like that can make an amazing difference in conversation. And that's just one of hundreds of examples.
Oh yeah, there's so many examples. I've read so much about it, listened to so much about it. And again, wordsmithing. People laugh at me and they go, what do you mean wordsmithing? I said, well, I can say something to you one way and you'll feel this way because of the words I chose.
Yep.
And then I can say it another way, use different word choices that your brain interacts with differently. And that's why there's a thesaurus. You ever heard of it? You can go and look, right? I tell people that's, I never understood until I was an older adult that the power of wordsmithing and how I could trigger somebody intentionally because I wanted them to back away and I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then I realized I was doing it. And then it became a tool in my toolbox to get people that shouldn't be in my 70-30
Right.
sphere gone.
Yep.
All right. So
Yep.
wordsmithing can bring out good. It can bring out bad. But once you learn to control the power of the word, right? Or words, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 10. My goodness, can you ever see an evolution in your life, in your communication life?
You really can. And I would highly suggest if people want to pursue that, read books by social psychologists who are doing the studies. You know, Robert Cialdini and Jonah Berger are two big names, and they have some awesome books out there that just talk about the use of magic words and different things you can do to get different effects from people.
Oh my
And
goodness, yeah.
I was on a podcast recently where they said, when does it cross the line into manipulation? And manipulation, from what you said earlier, it can have a good and bad side. You can manipulate things to the good or to the bad. But to the point of wordsmithing, manipulation has a negative connotation.
Of course, yeah.
So my response is always, if you go about wordsmithing with good intentions, it'll be good. I never advocate for a company to use that to sell a product that people don't really need or to sell a faulty product. And that's part of the reason I interview people.
Oh
If I
yeah.
feel we can work together, we'll work together. If I don't, I'll politely refer you to somebody else. So,
I
yeah,
don't get why people don't like the word manipulation. No, like it's because of the context of society of how they've made the word feel, but we're manipulated every moment. From the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed, there's
no
manipulation
question.
happening. And you know what? That's okay. If somebody's
Yep.
manipulating somebody to wear deodorant, awesome. That's great. I'm happy because I don't have to smell them. But you know what I mean? So there's a commercial on, buy this deodorant, or sometimes it's stupid commercials because we should know, but guess what? The general population needs to be reminded that they need to wear deodorant.
Right.
So Jake, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
My closing message is simply this: your life isn't over until it's over, which means that every minute of every day you're making a decision. You're either trying to gain pleasure, you're trying to avoid pain, but it's important to realize those are small moments in your life. One exercise I would encourage people to do is pull out a tape measure and put your finger right at your age, and then take it about an inch out and say, that inch is how long I'm going to endure pain while I make tough decisions. And then look at the rest of the tape measure and how much you have left and think, that's the rest of my life that I can live. On the other side of stress and pain is your life. So make that decision to make your life better. Know you're going to go through pain, but it's going to be transient and it's okay. You'll grow as a result of it. So that's my parting piece of wisdom or soapboxeology, whatever you want to call it.
It's great. I love that. Um, one of the things that we don't give credit to is the fact of how much we can educate others. So, that last piece of information, that closing message is fantastic, right? And I hope the people that are listening or watching this podcast, if you missed anything, the greatest thing is in life, listen to it again. You can get great value, right? Jake has a lot of good
Yep.
information. Take some notes. I myself listen to my own podcasts again because I know how much value I can get from listening to them again. So one of the things I wanted to ask you too before we wrap up, you're writing a book. How's that going? How's that process going of the 210 rule of communication book you're writing?
It's going good. Thank you. It's still slated for May of 2024. So I think I'm on target to hit that. The hard part about writing a book on communication is that you go back and you reread it again. You go, oh, I could have communicated that differently. So I'm lucky to have a very patient publisher and editor who just says, stop thinking and just write. And that's been very helpful. But yeah, the book hopefully will be launched in May of 2024, and it's going to be the 210 rule, why cadence trumps content every time.
That's awesome. I look forward to it. So please reach out to me. Let me know when it's out.
Will do.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, you talked about the fact of publishers and stuff not necessarily being happy. When I went through my book, it was 5 months of going back and forth, and they'd write something that they thought was better than I had written, or vice versa. And it was they had their heart in the right place, but I knew what I wanted to present,
Of
right?
course.
So
Yep.
I knew what I wanted to be, because I'm writing a book about give a heck, right? How to live life on purpose and not by accident. And I wanted it to talk about my origin, and people watching or listening that are familiar with me, my whole brand is based around that. So from my book
Right.
to my podcast, my finance business, all of it is about just listening, being a good person, being kind, giving a heck, because you've gone through it all and you don't want people to have to suffer. You suffer for 10 years. Imagine if somebody could have helped you, Jake, collapse that 10 years to 2 years,
Would have been amazing.
1 year, right?
Yep.
So we have a responsibility, in my opinion, we have a responsibility to humankind to constantly drive change. Even if Jake only helps 2 clients right now, how many other people are those businesses helping?
Right.
We don't always need to see the big macro, right? The micro is what I worry about. The macro will take care of itself, and a lot of people are going to benefit because of what I've helped them with, because of my trials and tribulations, my valley of despair, and my climb in life. I don't want the music to die in me, brother. I don't think you do either. And people say, music, what are you talking about? Well, I have a song in me. I have music in me that wants to shine, that wants to come out. And I use that analogy of having music die inside of me, because there's so many things that if I died tomorrow, I'd be robbing the world of all the experiences I've had. Those experiences made me an expert in certain things. And if it can help somebody one step closer to not suffering anymore, it's worth it. It's worth being vulnerable and putting myself out there and putting the effort into, like, this podcast, my book, my business, just like you. So keep it up, brother. Right?
Thank
The
you,
world
man.
needs you. Right? It
And
really
thanks for
does.
having me on your show. This was truly a pleasure. So thank you.
You're welcome. So our time's up, and I want to respect our listeners and your time. What's the best way that people can reach you, Jake?
They can go to my website, which is jakestahlconsulting.com, or they can just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I don't have a million social media channels. I'm a pretty focused guy, so you can get in touch with me at either of those spots.
Fantastic. For those people that are new to the show, just go to giveaheck.com and you can hit on the podcast menu button. You'll see a picture of Jake and abbreviated show notes, which will give you the information you just talked about so that you can easily find him. Or just like most of us, just go on to Google and Google his name. You'll probably find him really easy. I know I did. I checked it out. Right. So any last parting words, Jake?
That's it, my friend. Just live your life because it's yours.
Oh, thanks, brother. I appreciate you. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Jake. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.